Okay, we're live now.
Excellent. Welcome everyone to the Howard County Planning Board meeting of February 6, 2025. We ask for your patience as we try to conduct this meeting both in person as well as virtual. If you are here via WebEx, please speak clearly into your phone or computer microphone. If you are experiencing technical issues, please send an email to planningboard@howardcountymd.gov, which is monitored during this meeting. Ms. Kinney, can you establish a quorum, please?
Mr. McAlilly,
Here?
Mr. Cecil,
Here.
Mr. Godsey,
Here.
and Miss Mosier.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 So moved. Thank you very, very much. The item tonight is the Gateway Master Plan Workshop. We will be hearing a presentation from Ms. Kendall from the Department of Planning and Zoning.
All right. Hi, everyone. How are you? Thank you so much for having us this evening. It's really lovely to be here. Great to see all of you. And tonight I am joined by my esteemed colleague, Kate Bollinger, who will be co-presenting with me. But tonight we wanted to provide an overview of what we're calling our preferred plan for Gateway, which basically is going to be presenting the vision for its transformation of an innovation district. So as you know, we're in a master planning process to envision how Gateway may be able to redevelop in the future to be, as I said, what we're calling an innovation district. So a lot of the elements that we're going to be presenting to you tonight were already presented to the public on January 21st and 22nd. So we're basically just going to walk you through the same presentation that we gave to them, but we're inviting questions from the planning board. So as we go through the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop us at any time. We really want to invite a conversation with all of you. And so just feel like we can kind of keep it somewhat informal. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate to kick us off.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks again so much for having us tonight. So our presentation, it's divided into 7 sections. Really, there are 6 key content sections, and Mary and I are going to go back and forth in the presentation. Again, please stop us if you have a question or something that you'd like to discuss. All right. So to start off with some background on the project, we've been working on the Gateway Master Plan since January of 2024. So just over a year since we kicked this off and started our project with our consultant team. And so we started off with an open house event with the public. After that, our consultants got into their evaluation of the market and the site. They then developed some preliminary concepts that evolved into 3 master plan options, and then that got refined into the preferred master plan presentation. So that's where we are now. That's our current stage. And that's what we'll be walking through tonight. From here, where do we go? We're going to be working with our consultants to prepare a public draft of the plan that will go out to the community for review and feedback. And then after that, we're going to refine the document for the council adoption process, which also involves coming back to planning board for your review and recommendations. All right, so I mentioned that the team developed 3 options. These are the 3. They're the Woonerf, and you're going to hear a lot more about the WUNRF and what exactly is this term. You're going to hear a lot more about that tonight. The other two options were the town square and the nodes. And without getting into too much detail, really the overarching idea behind all three options was to create a public focal point, to identify something that would create what they call a there, or a focal point that the innovation district can really rally around. And what we heard when we went out to the community on the three options was a lot of support, a lot of positive feedback about that first option, about the WUNRF. But we also heard a lot of positive feedback about the town square and the nodes. So in a bit, we'll get to the preferred plan framework, and we'll explain how it combines aspects of the best ideas from all three of these options. But first, this is an innovation district master plan. This is really the driving force behind the plan. So I'm going to spend some time explaining what an innovation district is, talk about key components of that, and also about the market opportunities that our consulting team found. And we've been really fortunate that our consulting team includes a group called Stiletto Consulting, and they specialize in the creation and the operation of innovation districts. So the overall goal is to transform Gateway from its current condition, which is really a traditional business park, into an innovation district. And I've got a series of slides to help explain and visualize what that means. So if you look at this chart, you can see that a business park and an innovation district, they have some components that are in common, particularly when it comes to employment-based uses, commercial office, industrial uses, labs. In Gateway right now, there are pathway, there's walking, biking trails, but an innovation district, it brings so many other components that really take a business park to the next level. And this is about facilities, services, and programming, all of which are focused on growing and supporting targeted strategic industries. So you might be wondering why an innovation district, and the reason behind innovation districts is to address some of the challenges that businesses face, and these are listed on the slide. Examples are accessing resources, taking discoveries in their research and commercializing them, building a pipeline of a talented workforce, and more that you can see. And so the idea behind the innovation district is to intentionally plan to support these businesses, to work with institutions and partnerships that are going to facilitate their growth. And so an innovation district, it is about the place as far as the land and the facilities and the real estate, but those aspects alone are not enough to make an innovation district. It's really also about that programming, it's about networking, and it's about collaboration and bringing people together to help support the discovery of ideas. So just to drive it all home a little further, here are some of the key features of an innovation district. Again, it's programming, like networks and accelerators and incubators. And then there's partnerships. There's partnerships with academia, with institutions in the industry. And then there are these aspects that have to do with the place, that have to do with the mix of land uses and enhancements that support quality of life and offerings that create that live, work, and play environment. So knitting it all together is what makes a great place. And then I've got 2 slides that the consultants put together. And I should mention that all of these are our consultant slides that, that we're covering tonight. So this is a general visualization of a traditional business park, which, many of which were built in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. And this somewhat represents what you see in Gateway today as far as surface parking lots and employment uses. And so then the transformation into an innovation district is about adding green space, adding other types of uses that will and keep people there after the workday ends. So there's retail and there's dining and there's housing. And there's flexible workspaces. Let's see. All right. And you also have greater access as far as sidewalks, bike paths, all of which combines to let this business park redefine itself and evolve into what our consultants are emphasizing is the workplace of the future. So just a little bit about Gateway today. It's about 1,100 acres. There are some vacancies, which our consultants note is not uncommon in the US. It's something that has been rebounding. They've also noticed that vacancies really vary by property in Gateway. So there are some properties that have higher vacancies, but there are also many that are well occupied. On the industry side, Gateway is already a magnet for some key industries. So there's that base to build upon. And it has the Maryland Innovation Center, or the MIC. And this is a strong asset. And again, something that can be built upon as an anchor for the district. So this slide is just listing some of the key ingredients that will take Gateway from today into its transformation tomorrow. And so it involves all of these factors that you see. Just to point out a few, this is a long-term plan. So this is a redevelopment that is going to happen in phases. It's a large site, it's 1,100 acres. And it's not all going to redevelop at once. There's also partnerships. There's the partnerships with academia, other institutions that will need to be developed. There's a governance structure that needs to be created to facilitate innovation. And there's this opportunity to leverage strengths of industries and what's happening in the region. And a good example of that is the Tech Hub, which is a designation that the Baltimore region, including Howard County, including Gateway, has received. So again, it's about maximizing and positioning Gateway as a leader and a convener in priority industries. So there are 2 types of industries that our consultants have pointed out as far as categorizing them. There's areas of strength. These are existing strengths. And then there are areas that are emerging. And so on the strength side, there's cybersecurity, defense contracting, scientific research, software development. And then on the emerging areas, there's medical laboratories, there's instrument manufacturing, and there's also distribution and logistics. And then this slide, which I won't go into detail, it gives a summary of what all of those industries do. And we do have this presentation on the website. So that covered the innovation districts and the targeted industries. Another thing that our consulting team looked at is the market and the market demand. So what they found is there is potential for continued employment growth in Gateway. And they've put some numbers to that demand. They found that over 30 years, Gateway could add an addition of 4,700 to 8,100 new jobs. And if you translate that into non-residential square feet, it's about 1 million to 1.8 million additional employment space beyond what's already there. Then on the housing side, the consultants estimate that there's demand for 4,500 to 6,600 multifamily units and 1,200 to 1,800 denser missing middle units. And all of this demand, this is projected over a long-term, a 30-year time frame. However, it's important, the consultants have emphasized that the market is a snapshot in time. It's telling us what the market is now, and demand is not necessarily what will be built. So the market, it can change, and there are other factors like zoning, like the willingness of property owners, the lending community. There are all these factors that all need to come together in order for things to be realized on the ground. And with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Mary.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, so the market demand, the trying to build an innovation district, that is, and the programming aspects that come with it, that's one component. But what we're doing with this master plan is really trying to create a roadmap that will guide the physical redevelopment of the area. So that's what's in this redevelopment approach. We have to think about, what do we want the land use mix to be? What are we going to think the building heights, and what is this urban form going to look like, so that it really does support that culture and climate of innovation and attract the businesses that we want to attract here. So next slide, Kate. Yeah, so we'll start by looking at overall what the conceptual framework is for this preferred vision, for the preferred plan as it is right now. So Gateway, it's, as you know, a fairly traditional business park at this point in time, with a lot of buildings surrounded by parking lots. And I don't know if anyone's ever tried to walk around Gateway, but it's not the most enjoyable experience. So it's a little bit challenging to walk in between buildings. So this overall framework for how we're envisioning this preferred plan starts to envision its redevelopment really focuses on that public focal point, which we're calling a WUNR. And that's in the center. That's a yellow line with a kind of red dotted line over top. This is the big idea. This is the big public space that's going to create the there. That's going to become the center of pedestrian and commercial activity. It'll be the heart of Gateway. And right now, Gateway kind of misses it. It's missing a center. There's no, what we like to say, corner of Main and Main. You know you've gotten to Gateway because of a what we think is a pipe sculpture. That's a pipe sculpture of some kind that as you're coming in the entryway. So this is, again, all about how we try to create the there. And it allows us, this WUNR allows us to create a place that people will gather. And that will help with all of those other programming pieces we were talking about that are necessary for an innovation district. Giving people a place to gather helps with collaboration, helps with innovation, and gives the area an identity. And it makes a place that people and businesses want to be. So this conceptual framework also includes what we call nodes. So they are those red circles shown on the plan. And this is the thought where there might be more flexibility, higher intensity of uses of development. And within each of those nodes, there might be something like an urban plaza within them or like a mini town square. So that's how we tried to take the best of all of those three options that were presented to you before. We got a lot of really great public feedback on the WUNRF. There was interest in being nodes. And then people liked the town square, but then we thought it would make the most sense to put those sort of mini town squares, urban plazas within each node. And then one more big idea, of course, what's very important based on a lot of public feedback is we don't want Gateway to continue to feel isolated. So there's a lot of recommendations for how you can better connect Gateway via multimodal connections and a lot of pedestrian and bike connections, which we'll get into once we get to some of the transportation slides. So bikeability, pedestrian accessibility, and connectivity is all certainly very important elements of this preferred plan. Next slide, Kate. So this is just an artist's depiction of how the conceptual framework might play out over a 30-year period. Remember, this is a 30-year plan. You'll see that all of this site is not envisioned to be redeveloped within the first 30 years. 1,100 acres is pretty large. And a lot of the redevelopment in the first 30 years is really focused within Columbia Gateway Drive along where the WUNRF is envisioned to be located, and in the southern end of Gateway along the CSX rail, which, as you may have noticed on that previous drawing, is envisioned to become a multimodal corridor. Okay, next slide. And then here's an example of what another rendering, an illustrative concept of how the site could then redevelop post 30 years. So if you find that core and encourage and incentivize that redevelopment in that core, then it could grow from outside of that core. Okay, next slide. So this is all about what's our approach to making a more walkable gateway, especially within that WUNRF, because as I said earlier, walkability and connectivity is very important. And this plan proposes to break down Columbia Gateway Drive, which essentially feels a bit like a mega block or a super block as shown on the left. It's really not designed for walking. It's really designed for automobiles. So the WUNRF comes in and that creates a spine down the center, and it connects multiple existing parcels and gives a lot of access to a public pedestrian focused amenity. So a lot of those parcels would then have some really great connectivity to each other and to that focal point. And creating those pedestrian environments, as Kate's mentioned, is really important for innovation districts because people want to get to the other amenities quickly and they want to be able to run into colleagues. They say, or at least our consultants have said, innovation happens when ideas collide. So we want to give physical space for people to run into each other, to collaborate, which are all things that allow that innovation to happen. So again, the WUNRF is the central spine. And from there, we introduce those secondary streets, which are shown in red, and then they help to break down that mega block, which will make just that area feel much more walkable. And then finally, on the last image on the right, you can see the dashed red lines, and that's where we want to try to create new pedestrian connections that's all within that mega block. Next slide. So for those of you, has anybody been to a WUNRF? Any of our planning board members been to a WUNRF? Great. Yeah, so the WRF in DC is probably the one that's the closest to us, but they're all over, and it's a nice big shared amenity. It's a street that's shared by people walking, biking, and by cars. Of course, the cars are moving very slowly. Next slide. So the WUNRF, it's a Dutch term. There are a lot of modern examples, of course, in Europe and then here in the United States as well. And from my understanding, they've been fairly successful. And we want to that WUNRF, what we want the WUNRF to achieve is kind of help create a dynamic environment that will encourage, incentivize activity after 5 p.m. And this will include integrating new residential opportunities here, right? And of course, the ability to walk and bike to work. WUNRFs are also a really great marketing tool, They help to communicate to a company that we've created a place that businesses and people want to work and live. And then there will also be, as you'll see later, some ideas for how we'd have shared facilities for collaboration and incubator spaces that support the Maryland Innovation Center. And of course, also the area is planned with outdoor amenities and open space. So this is a very high-level diagram of the kinds of activities that could occur as ground floor uses. So we want to see more ground floor uses, of course, on the Wooner that encourages pedestrian activity. We're not saying that you have to put a fitness center here or a coffee shop there, but these are just some examples to give you an idea of what we think of when we say ground floor activating uses. So basically, the key takeaways from what you've heard so far is what we're trying to do, what this preferred plan is proposing is we want to build on the industry strengths that are in Gateway and cultivate that innovation ecosystem. We want to create a unique place that encourages mixed use redevelopment and creates vibrancy that supports innovation. And we want it to be a walkable place. And we want to encourage a lot of pedestrian activity through those ground floor activating uses along the Wooner, but also within those nodes of activity where we try to encourage more retail and other types of gathering spaces. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the redevelopment approach, that roadmap, right? How do we get there? And it starts by organizing the area into 9 sub areas. It's 1,100 acres. It's pretty large. So trying to break it down into smaller areas gives us a little bit more of a manageable framework for zoning, public infrastructure. It helps define the character and urban form within each of these sub areas as well. And these sub area boundaries do follow property lines or street lines. So in terms of what we think the future land use mix might be, the overall goal is to allow a mix of uses in all sub areas, but recognize that each sub area might have a slightly different focus. For example, you've got focus area, an area that will focus on employment uses, other areas residential, and then some areas that will have a dual focus. So for example, in areas like the Wooner, we would want to see a mix of both residential, a fairly even mix of both residential and non-residential uses. So this map is just showing how these, right now, how the sub areas or these focus areas are distributed throughout the site. As you can see, the employment focus areas, those are blue. Those are primarily along major roads, along 95 and 175. And that is where there'd be a lot higher visibility for some of those businesses that might establish there that want to be seen from 175 and 195. And then you have the residential focus areas, which are the kind of gold yellow color. And they're placed in close proximity to where we have existing residential or close to where we're planning future amenities such as that CSX multimodal corridor. And then you have that dual focus area, sub area 3, and that's where that Wooner is proposed. And that's just where, like I said, we're trying to see where we want to, where there'd be a good mix of use between residential and non-residential to support that vibrancy that we want to see along the Wooner. Next slide. So then if you remember, we talked about those nodes. There were those circles that were in a couple, about 5 or 6 of them throughout the site. And the idea is to allow higher intensity development there. Each node would contain a public open space, such as an urban plaza. And the idea is that where we'd want to concentrate retail. So you need to create, again, a there that supports the retail. So putting it within those nodes is what the preferred plan is recommending. Nodes might be anchored by some existing assets like the Maryland Innovation Center, or there could be opportunities for new assets like a transit node, which we're going to show you on a upcoming slide. But this one first is just an illustrative concept of what we're calling the innovation node. This is at the north end of the Wooner, right there where the Maryland Innovation Center is located, and introduces a new asset, which is called the Innovation Hub. So that hub, it is a physical space dedicated to partnerships among researchers, businesses, and creators intentionally located in close proximity or recommended to be located in close proximity to the Maryland Innovation Center to support all the great work that is being done there. And then here's another example of a node that we're calling the TOD, or Transit Oriented Development Node, and that's at the southern end of the WUNRF. And then this emphasizes the importance of transit in the future. And it also illustrates how taller buildings can help frame the public realm. You see how you have those taller buildings that are just bordering that urban plaza in that node. So again, we're really trying to do everything we can to demonstrate how we can create a there, not only with public spaces, but also with the built environment and the urban form. Next slide. So this is now a diagram that's looking at building heights throughout the site, especially along the WUNRF, and it just shows how you can integrate a variety of building heights along the WUNRF. And then we go to the next slide, which is a plan view that's showing what the preferred plan is envisioning in terms of what the potential maximum heights could be. So darker purple shows where taller buildings could be allowed, again, along 175 and 95. And then the lighter the purple, the lower the building heights. But the redevelopment approach does anticipate that there could be opportunities through future zoning regulations that might allow, say, taller buildings or greater density in exchange for various public amenities and infrastructure, which we're going to get into in a couple of slides. Next slide. Oh, and then here is another example that just is showing how various buildings can frame streets and how we want the buildings to relate to the streets and the public spaces. So entrances to parking garages would not be allowed along the WUNRF. That would be allowed on a secondary street, for example. All right. And now it's I'm going to turn it back over to Kate to talk a little bit about the plan's affordable housing goals, because we've heard over and over, certainly as outlined in HOCO by Design, that affordable housing is a really important goal for our future development. So Kate.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, so the preferred plan, we are building on HOCO by Design and all of the guidance that it includes for housing and for activity centers like Gateway, and how future activity centers should provide for diverse, accessible, and affordable housing options when they redevelop. So for Gateway, the housing goals are consistent with HOCO by Design, with the general plan. And the approach for Gateway is calling for 15% moderate income housing units, along with incentives for low income housing units, for disability income units, and for age restricted units. And we talk about denser missing middle housing types. And we see this as an opportunity for Gateway that should be allowed, and also that incentives for homeownership should be considered here. Now I'm going to switch gears and talk about open space. So the overall goal with open space is to create an interconnected network of green spaces. And what you can see on the slide is that there is a range of open space types. The WUNRF is the primary space out of these. And we also have a major feature that I'll show you on the plan view in a moment. That's the Columbia Gateway Drive Linear Park. Mary mentioned urban plazas as type of space that would be located within the nodes. But then we also have neighborhood parks. We have pocket parks that can be located in the residential areas, in the neighborhoods. And then finally, there's the CSX multimodal corridor. So this is a real opportunity for transformation of the abandoned rail line to support different modes of travel and connect Gateway to other communities. So here's how this framework, how all of these types can come together into a network. So this is an illustrative concept showing all of these. And it's important to keep in mind for this and for all of our concepts that we're not trying to imply that these parks are going to go in these exact locations. Really what we're trying to do is give a general sense, some general guidance, and show in the illustration how they could be connected. Another thing to keep in mind is that these spaces could be publicly owned or they could be privately owned but publicly accessible. And so there can be a combination of those. And then this illustration is showing how an urban plaza could be designed and how it can achieve different goals like increasing outdoor comfort with shade. And so that's what this is showing with this structure here. And then this illustration is helping to visualize this linear park. So what this is along Columbia Gateway Drive, it's taking the existing path that's there and showing how it could expand into a linear park. And then this diagram is showing a neighborhood park. And what it's illustrating with the circle is the idea that a neighborhood park should be within walking distance. It should be convenient and accessible for the entire neighborhood. All right, so the last component of the redevelopment approach that I'll cover is about zoning. So right now there's no zoning district in the county that would really be suitable to realize the vision that we've been talking about for Gateway. So what the preferred plan does is it identifies some alternative zoning tools that should be further explored when zoning is developed after the master plan. And these types of alternative tools include performance zoning, incentive zoning, overlay zoning, and form-based zoning. And so all of this should be further evaluated to determine the suitability for Gateway. All right, so for some takeaways about the redevelopment approach, it's really about encouraging and incentivizing a mix of uses. It's about allowing taller buildings, particularly along highways where there's great visibility, and also in the nodes where taller buildings can help to frame public spaces and serve as focal points for retail. The framework is also about creating this walkable, more urban form and establishing an interconnected network of open spaces. And so pursuing alternative zoning is going to be the approach to achieve this vision. All right. So now I'm going to switch gears again and spend some time on sustainable design. So sustainable design strategies in the preferred plan are organized into two main areas. One is decarbonization. So this is about reducing and eliminating carbon emissions. And then the second is about resiliency. So this is about responding to climate-related challenges. And overall, these goals and strategies are building upon and aligned with the county's climate action and resiliency plan. So for decarbonization, to point out some of the features at a district level, The preferred plan is looking at the transportation network as a way to reduce emissions. And this can be achieved with investments in pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, which provides alternatives to driving, and also with transit opportunities that can have fewer emissions. Then moving from the district level to the building level, we're also looking at high performance buildings. And these are buildings that are oriented to optimize the sun. They integrate high efficiency systems. There's grid interactive buildings. So there's multiple ways for buildings to decarbonize. And then looking at renewable energy, there's solar as a theme here, but another thing that the consultants have emphasized is that remember that this is a 30-year plan, and technologies are constantly changing. So the idea is that we should remain open to efficiencies in energy production and storage, and anticipate that change in 30 years and beyond. And they pointed out the Howard County Circuit Courthouse as one example of a precedent for roof-mounted and ground-mounted solar, which I understand together provides half of the energy needs for the building. Now on the resiliency side, we're looking at water treatment and reuse. So this includes things like harvesting rainwater for irrigation. And water reuse is looked at in a holistic way as far as looking at all the opportunities for water reuse, such that where there's an on-site treatment process that helps to reduce demand for potable water, that can reduce discharge. And the goal of all of this is to create a closed water cycle. And then the last slide on sustainability and resiliency is about heat island mitigation. So this is something that will be increasingly important in a dense urban environment. There's a need to keep people cool, and we can do that by increasing tree canopy, by using light colored materials, and also by increasing vegetation. All right, and with that, I'm gonna cover some slides on transportation and mobility. Just a few more on these, and then I'll be passing it back to Mary to close us out. All right, so this slide is covering site access and circulation. So this is all about new access into and out of the site. And what you see, the orange lines are representing bicycle and pedestrian connections. And then if you look at the blue, this is vehicular access. So this is access somewhere in the vicinity of from 108 over to 95 along Maryland 175. And for reference, this is close to where the Gateway Overlook, the Costco and the Trader Joe's are located. So our transportation engineers have looked at an access point in this area at 108, at 95, or between the two. And what they've emphasized is that this type of new access from Maryland 175 is going to require further evaluation and coordination with the State Highway Administration. So instead of recommending one access point, the plan is suggesting that a new point be further evaluated and located somewhere in the vicinity of this blue bubble. Regardless of where it's located, the goals of this access are to alleviate traffic congestion, connect to surrounding communities, and also create a new welcoming entrance to Gateway. And then this diagram is showing the envisioned transportation network for Gateway, adding the network within the site as well. So this network, the engineers are designing, anticipating all of the streets to be multimodal. So that means that they're complete streets that are supporting different modes of travel in a safe way. And it's about creating this interconnected network of streets that's generally following property lines and that's also extending some existing streets where possible. And then this plan is illustrating how different street types from the county's Complete Streets Design Manual could be applied to Gateway. So parkways, boulevards, town center connectors, and town center streets. And then this slide is just illustrating two of those, the boulevard and the town center connector. And the illustrations show how people using multiple modes, driving, bicycling, walking, can safely do so. So it's a 30-year plan. And as I mentioned earlier, with sustainability, technology does constantly change. So the plan is open and flexible to future technologies with regards to transportation and transit. And this is an example of an autonomous shuttle. I believe it's in Rhode Island. And so the preferred plan is open to this type of smaller scale transit that could potentially connect Gateway to surrounding areas. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Mary to bring us to the end of the presentation.
Yes. Thank you all so much for your attention. We're almost there, and we're more than happy to have a conversation with you or answer any questions you may have. So of course, a redevelopment roadmap, a redevelopment approach like what you're seeing here is going to have numerous infrastructure items that may be needed. And of course, all of which we do know will require further study and evaluation. But here we've grouped them into a couple of subcategories. So these are all of the improvements and infrastructure needs that you saw on previous slides. The first subcategory is we're calling public facilities, which does include, potentially needing a school, and we'll talk about that on a future slide. But it also includes the fact that we may need some more public safety, fire, EMS, libraries, and parking garages in this area. And then there's a full set of transportation improvements, both to connect into the site via vehicular access, but also a lot of bike and pedestrian access improvements, and then a lot of transportation improvements made within the site, because there will need to be a lot of new streets and reconfigured streets to accommodate the walkable, bikeable environment. We also took a look at what the water and sewer improvements that might be needed moving forward and to accommodate a redevelopment scheme as presented in the preferred plan. And we do have preliminary indication that suggests that we may need to fund some considerable improvements within the sewer system, and that would be in the midterm. So that's after the 10-year mark. And then we also have a lot of the open space amenities, such as the Woonerf and the Linear Park, and any of the neighborhood parks, and of course, any urban plazas that may come in as a part of the redevelopment. And then those innovation facilities, namely that innovation hub. So that's a lot of infrastructure. And of course, it will need to be phased. And this concept, this map shows you one thought for how it could be phased. But again, all of this does need further study and evaluation. But one in the near term, within the first 10 years, redevelopment could be phased specifically in the north around the innovation hub, and that could help attract new industries and entrepreneurs. And then that's when we could phase in the first segment of the Woonerf and the internal roads networks that will connect to the Woonerf. And then you've got the CSX multimodal corridor in the south. And then in the midterm, which is in the 10 to 20 year mark, other physical infrastructure improvements that could be made would be the midsection of the Wooner and its associated internal roads that connect to it, that access point along 175, and then bringing that dedicated transit way multimodal corridor up into the site off of the CSX rail, which is where that transit node, that transit TOD node would be located down at that southern end of the Wooner. And then in the long term, which is in the 20 to 30-year mark, that's when the Wooner could be completed in the southern end and then connect into the roadway and that dedicated transit way. And of course, we did mention that if there is a need for a school in the future, what the school capacity needs might be will require additional evaluation and coordination with the Howard County Public School System. But as we're anticipating mostly multifamily development and some stacked townhomes, this will be a slightly more urban mixed-use environment than other areas in the county. So student yields are expected to be different than other areas in the county, but all of that would require further study and evaluation. And as this is a really large project, we wouldn't be recommending necessarily just one financing tool to support the infrastructure investments, but a combination of tools. This is just an example of some of the tools that would have to be, again, further evaluated to determine which tool is the most appropriate one to support the recommended infrastructure. And it will also depend upon the timing of when we are able to pursue that infrastructure. But this will all require longer term phasing and financing plan, which would be a next step after the master plan is adopted and approved. Okay, so now I'm just going to talk a little bit about schools. So let's turn back to our general plan, HOCO by Design, which offers guidance for future school sites and specifically offers guidance for schools within activity centers. So those are the places that we've targeted for mixed use redevelopment, and Gateway is one of the largest areas that has that opportunity. And HOCO by Design calls for exploring opportunities to co-locate schools with libraries, parks, and affordable housing. The idea is we want to make limited use of land and also leverage funding for public infrastructure and amenities. HOCO by Design also recommends that we examine alternative school models and prototypes that might occupy a smaller footprint or that has shared site amenities and could allow more vertical construction. So the big question through this process is there an opportunity in Gateway to pursue an alternative prototype if a school site is needed in the future? As you saw throughout the presentation, Gateway's future is envisioned to have a more urban built environment than other areas in the county. We're envisioning taller buildings, compact walkable areas, and a robust open space network. It will be an innovation district that attracts new industries, entrepreneurs, and academic partners. So on a couple of slides coming up, we're going to show you some examples of some school prototypes from all over the country that are in a more urban setting. But what you're going to see generally is that these schools occupy a smaller footprint. They have a lot of shared recreational facilities or rooftop facilities. They use shared parking strategies, so a parking lot doesn't have to be a part of a school site. And they may offer a bus drop-off zone on a secondary street. Many of them are more compact. They have a vertical design and perhaps offer a greater opportunity to be innovative, just like the Innovation District, and even more energy efficient. Okay, and go to the next slide. So here is the first school. This is a school in Arlington on a site that is under 2.5 acres, and they have about 775 students. This area doesn't have any outdoor fields, but they do have rooftop play areas. And the school follows a shared parking strategy. There is a garage for daily use and then another garage for events. And the bus drop-off zone is on a secondary street. And it's a fairly innovative design with that step massing, as you can see in the bottom right-hand image. And then another example, this is a school from San Francisco that serves kindergarten through 12th grade. They do have an athletic facility, but it is not within the school. It is about a block away. and it also has a parking garage as well. And then another school also in California in San Mateo. And this is on a site that is under 3 acres. And here is an example of actually having a parking garage underground. Next slide. And then here another example, San Francisco, where there's a school on a 1.5 acre site with a rooftop play area and a bus drop off on the street. And here's one in DC of a school that is located on a site just under 4 acres. They do have recreational play areas on the premises and also community gardens. And they offer parking for staff on site, but visitors are asked to park on the street. Next slide. And then finally, an example from New York. We're not implying that Gateway will look like New York, but there are some perhaps relevant components that may want to be considered, such as sports could occur at off-site courts like public parks, which is the case for this particular school. All right, so we've covered a lot, and thank you all so much for coming along for the presentation ride with us. But you may be wondering, where do we start with all of this work that's before us? And of course, the first step is getting through the master plan adoption process. But then after that, where do we start with implementation? And we think the first 5 years of implementation will involve some key steps, which starting with building up that innovation district program. And so if you go back to how we kicked off the presentation, talking about how you make an innovation district through programming, that's step one. And then we have to establish that new zoning structure, because currently the majority of the zoning is just a combination of M1 and some office zoning and a couple of new town zoning spots. Then we have to plan for and finance those infrastructure improvements and phase those appropriately. Evaluate the site access improvements along 175. Get all of the different organizational structures established to facilitate redevelopment, and plan for that road network construction. Figure out what the management of the public spaces will be. So for example, do we need to establish a business improvement district, a transportation demand management authority, attract an anchor institution to the area to support the innovation district programming and attract more businesses. And then we have to plan out for and manage those public spaces. And then of course, seek opportunities to acquire sites suitable for what our public infrastructure needs will be. Okay. So the key takeaways from what we just shared overall from this last section is we want this preferred plan. This preferred plan is proposing that Gateway be a sustainable place, and we should be incentivizing and encouraging a more sustainable and resilient design. We also want to see create an interconnected network, transportation network that serves all modes of transportation. And we need to plan for public facilities such as schools, fire, and police, and establish that infrastructure and financing plan in coordination with that alternative zoning program. And now this is just another illustrative concept that shows how the site could redevelop in the first 30 years. As you can see, you've got the CSX multimodal corridor in the south with a dedicated transitway that comes into the site. Nicely see the linear pathway around the Columbia Gateway Loop, where you see the Woonerf with the redevelopment occurring along the Woonerf. And then other nodes, for example, in that north, up by 175 and 95, where you see a node that's then connected to the Columbia Gateway Drive. And then the next slide, which just shows another illustrative concept for after 30 years. And then finally, our next steps. So where are we? We are, as Kate mentioned, this is just the preferred plan. We are taking public input and feedback on this plan. Actually, I think we closed the window on February 2nd, but we're happy to hear whatever it is our planning board members would like to share with us about their thoughts. And then we will be releasing what we call a public draft. So that will be the written document in support of what you saw today and any changes that may be reflected based on our public feedback and stakeholder feedback. And then that will be out for public comment. We'll be back to the planning board with another workshop sharing with you what's in the public draft. And then we'll take the feedback and then we'll refine the plan and then we'll bring it back to the planning board for a hearing and a recommendation for council. So with that, we'd love to kind of hear your thoughts, answer any questions you may have, invite discussion. Bring back any other slides.
That was awesome. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. Ms. Kendall and Ms. Bollinger. Excellent job. Excellent job. Board, any questions for staff today?
I can jump in. I don't really have any questions. I feel like Kate, Mary, and others have heard many questions from me throughout the process. But just, again, I've had the pleasure of kind of seeing this from the start as the planning board's representative on this committee and getting to see this evolve from where it started. And really just want to spotlight how much has gone into getting to this point. You know, I remember sitting in a space in our first meeting and, you know, we kind of started with 3 ideas between the town center, the nodes, and the WUNRF, and everybody wanted everything. Any idea? That sounds great, put it in there. And it, you know, still seems like a lot, but to really see it evolve into what it has become and really taking it into account of, you know, there are strong needs from representation from a lot of groups that participated, and a lot of advocacy into those meetings of, you know, making sure we're considering communities, considering business, considering needs, you know, considering the many restraints, but also the many opportunities within the district. So to really see it come together to where it is of, you know, it honors all of that feedback in a way that's still realistic to, it's a 30-year process. You know, in an environment where, you know, realities change, you know, sometimes realities change in 3 weeks. So just to see again where it is, you know, for Mary and Kate of, you know, getting to come off of the master plan and Hilco by Design, jumping into this, you know, it's remarkable. So I don't have necessarily any specific feedback at this point because feedback I've given in the past, I can see it within these documents. And so again, just appreciate it. Can't imagine how much has gone into it. Yeah, I just want to make sure, you know, I bring attention to that because it was so much.
Fantastic. Ms. Morger, anything?
I guess mostly just a couple of questions because I'm nosy. What is, I mean, I'm assuming at this point it's a little bit agnostic as to the details, but the transit way, can you talk a little bit more about what that is or could be?
Sure. So I think we're trying to stay flexible. But the idea is that you've got the kind of the CSX rail there in the southern end of the site. And then eventually there would potentially be some kind of rubber wheel transit in the future, maybe some sort of autonomous vehicle that would come up off the CSX rail, right? That will hopefully be connecting Gateway to other parts of the county, right? Via that 3.1 mile rail. It'll come up into the site. It has that transit stop, right, where that transit node will be at the base of the southern end of the WUNRF. And then people would continue on whatever that mode of transportation would be to get back onto that CSX rail. So it's a multimodal corridor, right, that should be able to accommodate multiple nodes, but not necessarily we're not necessarily envisioning that cars will be on that CSX multimodal corridor, but there could be some kind of rubber wheel transit and it would accommodate pedestrians and bikes.
Okay.
Did that help answer your question at all?
Yeah, is that intended to be like a local, obviously it could be a lot of things as we talk about the future, but like, is it envisioned as like a local connection loop, or is this like connecting out to like the larger bus network in the area?
I see. Yeah. Kate, do you want to jump in? Your cameras got turned off, and I don't know if it was just a connection problem. So I'm not sure if you're trying to give me visual cues.
I am here, and yeah, I got frozen on a strange expression at some point during the conversation, but I'm glad I didn't lose you entirely. Yeah, I think that the idea is that this could connect to other destinations in the county. I think it's still open as to where exactly that might be. And I think that the idea is to be open, flexible, and opportunistic for the best connections that can be made.
But if there is a transit stop, right, at that southern end, now would they plan to have? I mean, I think they already do have the RTA coming through, so I imagine that those routes would not change. I don't think the vision is necessarily that it would go all the way, as I mentioned earlier, go all the way down to that CSX multimodal corridor, but I'm sure it would travel along the transit way for as long as it could. But the goal is that any of the biker pedestrian paths that are within Gateway, as you saw, may have noticed on an earlier sketch or an earlier plan, that we are trying to connect them to existing pathways that are outside of Gateway. So we really want to bridge those gaps. Yeah.
Okay. And then sort of still in transportation, because that's my thing.
Yeah.
So obviously the existing connection to 175 is sort of like big, swoopy, wide. It looks like in all the drawings right now, we're still sort of keeping that form to it, as opposed to coming in into the more, and then like you sort of straightening that out and creating more of a T intersection there to sort of feed into the future sort of grid vision. Was there any like conversation about a faster change to character on that roadway, just to like, because it's going to be a pretty abrupt, like, okay, we're coming in, you're like on a high speed loop ramp, like you're about to enter the highway, and now you're at a place and like you slow down. Was that something envisioned at all?
Do you mean kind of cleaning up the feeling on 175, or just what it looks like coming in?
No, I mean, I think kind of abandoning 175 to be what it is, but that once you get off 175, that instead of continuing, and you can't see where I'm pointing, so I don't know why I'm bothering to do that, but where, because what is it called at that point? Yeah, so it's still Columbia Gateway Drive. Like, well, Columbia Gateway Drive comes in, and then Alexander Bell is like also coming in. Instead, just sort of straightening all of that out and making that like a T intersection where you come in and either turn left or right.
I see. Yeah. So our transportation engineers, so they've kind of evaluated kind of multiple ideas, but what they recognized is that we just have to do a little bit more study on that. I don't think they really considered doing a whole lot of internal changes once you get within Gateway. It's more so what's the most appropriate connection coming off of 175. So could that be a intersection at 175, 108? Could that be, say, a flyover coming off of 95, off the 175 ramp somewhere into Gateway? So those are all things that will just require much more evaluation beyond what we could do in the scope of this work, because we have to do this all in coordination with SHA,
right,
and the federal and was it FTA or the
FHWA, right, yeah, to do anything to those 95 ramps.
Yeah.
So okay, so I guess I would encourage, as you figure out what those access points look like off of 175, also considering modifying the character of Gateway, Columbia, like the Gateway Drive itself,
Yeah.
sort of help better convey what kind of place this is meant to be, that this is not actually, I mean, because the section of Gateway Center Drive, it's pretty big. We're talking
Yeah.
about, it definitely does not encourage low speeds.
Right. Right.
Um,
Okay.
But yeah, otherwise,
Yeah.
it's very,
I like-
very exciting.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, I like to think that the complete streets, so as redevelopment occurs and then, the complete streets designs could be applied. I think Columbia Gateway Drive is envisioned to be a boulevard. So to the extent that that would help create a little bit more, because the complete streets will create the character.
Yes. Yeah.
And I just don't recall exactly what the current, what the recommendation is for the Columbia Gateway Boulevard, Columbia Gateway Drive, but I believe it's some sort of boulevard.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
And then just out of curiosity, obviously like that programming aspect of the Innovation District, is that envisioned to be something where like, would that be the county, a county entity, like helping to like nurture that program? Would it be some sort of like partner? Would they be hiring someone to do that? It'd be a public-private partnership? Is that still all completely a question mark? Like how would that work?
Yeah, I think it's all open. So, there's certain aspects that I think our EDA would be able to take on as it pertains to programming, especially if it's something that is about supporting and potentially expanding the Maryland Innovation Center, because a lot of what the Innovation Center does kind of acts a bit like acts like an incubator. And it already does do creates networking opportunities for the businesses. But yet we also know that what makes Innovation District successful is that anchor institution, which should be an academic partner. So we'd be looking to kind of recruit and bring in an academic partner. But then we also talked about needing to establish some kind of governance structure that helps to kind of oversee and facilitate and encourage the programming to occur and the partnerships. So I do think a lot of that the county might have to sort of kick off, or perhaps the county in partnership with EDA would have to kick off. But in the long term, it would likely be a multitude of entities and organizations coming together to run the programming. And I don't know, Kate, you were, I think, saying something perhaps about transportation, and then I'd love to see if you have anything else to add to the programming piece.
Oh, I was just agreeing with you on the transportation, that I believe it was a boulevard as well.
Okay.
And
All right.
I think you covered it on the programming. Yeah.
Yeah, the program is very exciting. Very exciting.
Other questions, Barbara?
Nope, I am done finally.
Not a problem. Mr. Godsey.
Hey, so thank you so much for the presentation. This is so exciting. I'm very eager to see how the transportation plans solidify with more studies and more information. Eager to see how that potential access point ends up working itself out. I really love the designs that we have right now for the Wooners and just bringing life into the Gateway area. I did have a question that just popped in my head. I wanted a little bit more, I guess, clarification on the idea that we have here. You mentioned getting an anchor institution that was academic. Do we mean a satellite college of some sort, or what's the vision there?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of kind of flexibility for what that could be and what that looks like. So one thing our consultants like to say, if you've been to one innovation district, you've been to one innovation district. So what they look like, kind of what their niche is, who's really running it can vary. So it could be something like so EDA already has an MOU with Johns Hopkins APL, where they're kind of committed to work in partnership to making this a successful place for innovation. So does that mean that they come in and establish a campus? No, not necessarily. It just means that there might be other ways that they can support the activity here. Is it a community college, that maybe establishes themselves? Perhaps. Is it one of our existing businesses that already have connections to other academic partners that just grows and expands? Perhaps. So I don't have we don't have that commitment at this point in time. So that's why I can't directly answer your question.
100%.
But there's options.
Right.
But we talked to a few different academic partners and institutions in the area throughout the process.
Mhm.
So I think everybody is interested and excited about the direction this is going, and we'll certainly be keeping an eye out for what the opportunities might be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was really just trying to think of the more options that would exist, just to get
Yep.
a better view. So thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
But yeah, thank you, Marion. Thank you, Kate, for all of your work and diligence. I'm really excited to see what else happens with this project. That's all I have.
Yeah, this is just step one,
Yeah.
and many, many, many steps more to come.
That's fantastic. Ms. Kendall and Ms. Bollinger, excellent work, as always. A couple questions. One of the things that I am hearing frequently from different neighborhoods and with villages, and also when we were working on Complete Streets, is what is the planning for after-school teenagers? There needs to be talk of basketball courts, softball, running areas, pickleball, something to alleviate or relieve teens after school in the area. The other thing would be entertainment. Don't think we mentioned much about if there were areas that could be converted either at the Wanoff or farther out in the outlying areas for entertainment for either after happy hour or during happy hour that converts into an area where folks don't have to leave the area immediately, or if they do leave the immediate area, there's a place where they can gather and do things. Have we talked about that at all?
Yes. Hey, maybe, I don't know if we want to go back to any particular slide, but I'll just start by answering a couple of your questions when it comes to activities for teenagers. So one thing, one of our other members of the advisory committee is, of course, the Columbia Association. So there are, I guess, some properties in here that are would be served by the services and resources that are provided by the Columbia Association. So not that they currently have a facility in the area, but they would certainly be a part of trying to help bring more of those recreational programs to the area. So they would be, a partner in that sense. In terms of entertainment, I think the idea behind a lot of those ground floor uses along the Woonerf and within those urban plazas and within those neighborhood parks and that open space plan, that's where there could be more opportunities for entertainment and more things to do. Again, back to the Columbia Association, they've also said a lot of what they do is they help to organize a lot of that other more kind of recreational entertainment like programming that might occur within those open spaces, within those public amenity spaces. So I think they would be a partner in a lot of those areas.
Right. Fantastic. The other thing that I didn't hear much about, but I'm sure it's an afterthought, but I want to make sure it's within the initial planning, and that is trees, bioretention, open space, anywhere that you can find areas for pocket parks, just places that in the past, some of our places that we've approved in the past don't have those types of areas, and it would be nice to see those in there.
Yeah. Maybe Kate, do you want to go back to the open space, the plan view of the open space network?
Yep. Just a moment. We're almost there.
Yeah. So that's kind of the idea behind this particular slide. Now, this isn't saying that you specifically will have to be putting a neighborhood park in these areas, but the idea is that as we recognize where we have that residential focus area, that's an appropriate place to make sure we plan neighborhood parks in those areas. So as we get into writing whatever that alternative zoning program will be, planning for those other open space amenities will be an important part of it. Along that Wooners area, the U, that's where we're suggesting, well, we need to also plan for those urban plazas within those nodes, which also act as sort of smaller gathering spaces and potential opportunities for other sorts of activities. So green space certainly is intentionally meant to be planned as a part of the redevelopment.
Fantastic. You have swimming pools there also, right?
We don't specifically speak to swimming pools at this point in time.
Okay. It might be your Columbia Association connection, right?
Perhaps.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Well, it looks like you've considered anything and everything. That's a great thing. I'm just glad that we have a partner on the planning board that's in there working with you.
Yep.
I think that is it for now. The last thing, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, I truly like the idea of thinking about bicycles ahead of time instead of an afterthought. Planning that direction. What I highly recommend is early on, try to determine who's going to clean the bike lanes. That's one of the issues that we're having currently. And if we can plan it in ahead of time, try to figure out what kind of vehicles are going to be needed to get between the bollards and the curbs, where the snow is going to be plowed to, not just into the bike lanes, things
Yep.
like that. If those
Yep.
can all be figured in, that would be fantastic.
Yep.
That's all I had. Anybody else on the board have any additional input? No? All right. Ms. Kendall, do you have anything else for the board tonight?
No, nothing, but I just want to say it was lovely seeing you all. I don't get to come to the planning board quite as often, all that often. So it's just really wonderful to be here and see you all and chat with you. Thank you.
Another fantastic job. We are familiar with your work on the Complete Streets and Hoco by Design, and we know that this is coming along perfectly. So thank you very, very much. Without further ado, I want to announce.
Mr.
Yes.
McAlilly, one
Please.
last thing. Can I get someone to approve the recording of January 23rd as the minutes?
Okay, Mr. Godsey, can you ask that motion, please?
I move we approve the minutes for January 23rd's planning board meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All
And
right.
just
so
I have to abstain as I was not at that meeting.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Cecil. I'm so glad you reminded us. Thank you very, very much. All right, without
Thanks,
further
everyone.
ado,
I appreciate that.
I'd like to just announce that our next board meeting is February 20th. We'll be going over some budget items that night. It will be in person or virtual. I'd like a motion to adjourn, please.
Move we adjourn.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Excellent. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
So moved. Have a wonderful evening, you guys. We are adjourned.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thanks,
Bye,
Take care.
everyone.